The night at the train yard smelled like rust, rain, and bad memories. You ever walk into a place and feel like it's holding its breath? That's what it was like out there. Quiet, too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your skin crawl. I parked under that broken streetlight, the engine idling, fingers tapping the steering wheel just to remind myself I was still alive. Bill Carver was supposed to meet me at 9. He was an old friend of my father's, sheriff back in the day, the kind of man who didn't flinch when things got ugly. If there was anyone I could trust in this mess, it was him. But as the clock on the dash ticked past 9:30, something inside me started to twist. Trust feels like a warm thing until you realize it's been used to pull you closer to the fire. I saw movement near the tracks, just a silhouette at first, tall. Wearing a coat that flapped in the wind, the figure walked slow, steady, like he wanted me to see him. Coming. I opened the door, stepped out, rain pattering on my jacket, gravel crunching under my boots. "Bill!" I called out. The figure stopped about 20 feet away, face hidden by the brim of his hat. He didn't answer, just stood there, breathing heavy enough for me to hear it over the rain. Something about his stance felt wrong, too stiff, too calculated. "That you, Bill?" I asked again, voice louder this time. Slowly the man lifted his head, and that's when I knew. It wasn't Bill. Even in the dim light I could see the face was younger, smoother, clean-shaven. His eyes were dark, cold, like a man who'd forgotten what sleep felt like. He gave a little smirk, then said, "You shouldn't have come alone, Mr. Sullivan." My blood went cold. "Who the hell are you?" I demanded. He stepped forward, and that faint smirk turned into something meaner. "Bill sends his apologies," he said, voice calm as a funeral hymn. "He couldn't make it." I felt my fists clench, my pulse in my throat. "Where is he?" The man shrugged. "Let's just say he's resting." That word, resting, hit me like a bullet. I wanted to charge him, to grab him, to shake the truth out of his smug face, but something in his eyes told me not to. That wasn't a man bluffing. That was a man sent to deliver a message. He reached into his coat, pulled out a small, folded envelope and tossed it at my feet. It hit the gravel with a wet slap. "You want answers?" he said. "Stop playing hero, go home, stay dead." Then he turned and started walking back toward the shadows. "You tell whoever sent you," I started to shout. But he stopped me mid-sentence without turning around. "They already know," he said quietly. And then he was gone, swallowed by the dark and the rain. I stood there alone, soaked to the bone, staring at that envelope on the ground like it was a snake waiting to strike. I didn't touch the envelope right away. I just stood there under the rain, staring at it while my breath came out in little white clouds. Something in my gut told me that whatever was inside wasn't meant to be read. It was meant to hurt. I bent down, picked it up, and felt the paper sticking to my fingers. Soggy and cold. My name was written across it in ink that had run from the rain, but even through the smears I could tell whose handwriting it was. Trevor's, my own son. I swear for a second I forgot how to breathe. I tore the flap open with my thumb and pulled out a single folded sheet, creased and wrinkled, as if it had already passed through too many hands before finding its way to mine. The first line hit like a hammer. "Dad, if you're reading this, stop." My chest tightened. The letter went on, written in that same rushed scrawl I remembered from the notes he used to leave on the fridge when he was a kid. "You don't understand what you're getting into. It's bigger than you think. Madison and we didn't have a choice." The Whitmores. The next part was smudged, unreadable, water-soaked beyond saving. I could only make out a few words on dangerous. Deal. They know. I stood there reading and rereading those half-sentences until the words started to blur. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even fear. It was a warning, like a man trapped in his own mistake, trying to yell from the inside of a burning house. But what burned worse was realizing that if Trevor didn't have a choice, then someone else did. Someone above him. I folded the letter back up, tucked it in my coat pocket, and looked around the train yard. The place felt even emptier now. The silence loud enough to make my ears ring. Whoever that man was, he wasn't working alone. He knew my name, knew where I'd be, and carried a message from my son, which meant this whole thing had eyes everywhere. I got back in the truck, turned the heater on full blast, but I still couldn't stop shaking. The rain hit the windshield in steady sheets, and every drop looked like a clock, ticking down to something I didn't want to see. I drove into town and parked behind the old gas station, the one with the busted light and the smell of oil that never went away. Pulled out the letter again, looked at those half-smeared lines until my eyes burned. My son's handwriting, the same boy I'd taught to fish, to drive, to keep his word, now writing me letters through strangers in the dark. The words, "It's bigger than you think," kept circling in my head like a curse. I thought I'd been fighting Trevor, but now I realized he wasn't the enemy, he was the pawn. And whoever was moving the pieces had just shown me their hand.
The drive back from the train yard felt longer than it should have. The rain had stopped, but the sky was still this bruised purple, heavy and mean, like it was waiting to open up again. I couldn't stop thinking about that man. The one who wasn't Bill, the way he moved, the way he spoke. Calm, sure, like he'd rehearsed the whole damn conversation. You can tell a lot about a man by the way he holds silence. And that one, he wore it like armor. I kept seeing his face in my head. The slicked back hair, the eyes that never blinked. He wasn't some hired gun or street thug. No, this was someone who'd been, trained to make people disappear. Someone who believed in control. I spent the next morning making calls, quiet ones, the kind where you don't give away more than you ask. I called the sheriff's office, asked for Bill Carver, just to confirm what my gut already knew. The woman on the other end sounded puzzled. "Sheriff Carver retired 3 years ago, sir. Moved down to Arizona last winter." "You sure you got the right name?" My grip tightened on the phone. "Yeah," I said slowly, "I'm sure." When I hung up, my hands were shaking. Whoever had called me pretending to be Bill had been setting me up from the start. And that meant the people watching me weren't just local muscle. They had access to records, to people, to names. This wasn't just corruption. This was orchestration. By afternoon, I drove out to where the old Sullivan farm used to be. They were building fast, new trucks, new crews, new fences. I parked on the ridge overlooking what used to be my pasture and sat there, watching them tear into the earth my family had bled for. A man in a suit was standing near one of the site trailers, clipboard in hand, talking to a woman I recognized immediately. Madison. She looked different now, sharper, colder. She wasn't playing the grieving fiancé anymore. She was playing the boss. I zoomed in with my phone camera, snapped a few pictures. That's when I saw something that made my blood run cold. The man she was talking to was the same one from the train yard. The one who wasn't Bill. He leaned close, said something that made her laugh. That easy, comfortable laugh you only share with someone you trust. My stomach turned. They weren't just business partners. They were in this together. I found him at a bookkeeping office 2 blocks off Main. A little place that smelled like printer ink and old coffee. Exactly the kind of spot where dirty money goes to look clean. His name was Marcus Hale, or at least that's what Ben had muttered into the phone before the crash. When I walked in, he looked up. From a ledger like someone who'd been expecting a shoe to drop. He was younger than I pictured, neat. Hair, wire-frame glasses, fingers stained with numbers. He greeted me polite, like a man who counted other people's sins for a living and kept his own tidy. "You Frank Sullivan?" he asked. I nodded and sat. I didn't waste time on small talk. "You handle the Whitmore's accounts?" I asked, voice low. He hesitated, then said, "I consult. I keep things organized." That word, consult, was the kind they use when they don't want to admit they launder cash. I watched him, waiting for the first sign of a lie. He cracked like old paint before I knew I'd pushed the right corner. "Look, I don't want trouble," Marcus said. "I do numbers. I don't deal with faces." I leaned forward. "Whitmore's fund a shell company in Delaware 2 days before my farm sells. Money wires into accounts with Madison's name on them. The lawyer signs it off. You tell me you're blind and I'll tell you. I've seen enough." He put his hands up, palms open, the kind of gesture that screams surrender. It was supposed to be smooth, no blood. They wanted a clean transfer. Trevor signed because he trusted them. Madison handled the paperwork. Whitmore financed it, but they wanted separation, distance. They don't like their names on anything direct. His voice lowered like he was saying a prayer. There's more, he added after a beat. There's a consulting fee, a shell account in Cayman, tied to a developer who's also a donor to half the county commissioners. That was the line that made my stomach drop. Donors, commissioners, this wasn't just business. This was a web stitched into the town itself. I didn't drive straight back to the motel. My hands were still shaking from what Marcus gave me, and I knew if I went back there they'd be waiting. So I headed for the one place nobody in this town would think to look, the old grain mill off Highway 14. The place had been boarded up for years, but I still had the key my father gave me back when it was ours. It smelled of dust and diesel and something like memory. I parked behind a rusted truck, slipped inside, and spread those papers out on a wooden crate under the flickering light. Every page looked innocent until you knew what you were seeing. Transfers, coded invoices, names that shouldn't be there, and there it was again, that same damn phrase from Ben's notes, Project Redwood, the same name printed on the blueprints Trevor and Madison had been studying. This wasn't a simple land deal. It was a laundering front disguised as development. My son hadn't just sold me out. He'd sold out his conscience too. I heard footsteps outside, slow, deliberate, echoing off the concrete like someone who knew exactly where I was. My heart jumped. I blew out the lantern and grabbed the closest thing I could use as a weapon. A crowbar leaning by the door. The footsteps stopped right outside. Then a voice, low, calm, familiar. "Frank, open the door. We need to talk." It was Trevor. My grip tightened, breath stuck in my throat. Part of me wanted to swing that door open and hit him until I ran out of anger. The other part wanted to pull him into a hug and ask him why. But before I could move, another voice joined in, muffled but unmistakable. "Madison. He's got the files," she said sharply. "Don't let him out of there." My blood turned to ice. That's when it hit me. They weren't here to talk. They were here to clean up loose ends. I slipped toward the back. Exit. Papers stuffed under my coat. Every step careful not to make a sound. The old mill creaked like it was betraying me with every move. I could hear Trevor at the door now, slamming his shoulder against it, wood splintering. Madison's voice came closer. "Just get it done, Trevor. He's not your father. Anymore." That line hit harder than the noise. Not because it was cruel, but because it sounded rehearsed. She was breaking him down, using the same control I saw her use on me, on everyone. I made it out the back, ran through the wet grass toward the truck. My boots slipped in the mud, my breath burning in my chest. Behind me, the door finally gave way. "Dad!" Trevor shouted, his voice cutting through the night. But it wasn't anger I heard. It was something worse. Regret.